was the upset heard around the country that nobody saw happening, and I mean nobody, because just ask Nick Saban. But Vanderbilt did in fact beat #1 Alabama in glorious fashion on Saturday, 40-35 to be exact, for their first win over a top-ranked team. Vanderbilt also snaps a 60-game losing streak versus AP top 5 opponents, which is the longest in the AP poll era, dating back to 1936. Now, here's some more history for you to help you understand just how historic this win was. Vandy had an 0-10 all-time record prior to this matchup and switched up the history books with their first win versus an AP #1 team, and it was also Vandy's first win against Alabama on field since 1984. So, Sam, how did Vanderbilt get the win and get the upset over Alabama?
I don't know if this is the trick question, but am I allowed to say Diego Pavia? Diego Pavia is elite, and here's what I mean by that. This is a quarterback who was at New Mexico State last year when New Mexico State upset Auburn in Jordan-Hare. Not an upset, a 21-point upset. This is the same offensive coordinator. Jerry Kill was the head coach. Now he's the head coach of the offense. They brought that same system and structure to Vanderbilt. This is the same Vanderbilt team that in week 1 beat Virginia Tech, and they looked more like Virginia Tech than Virginia Tech looked like Virginia Tech. They control time of possession over 42 minutes. They control the number of plays, 75-45. And so they just did what they've done all season long, is just run the ball, take big plays, make big plays, and then have that same confidence that Diego Pavia brought from New Mexico State when they beat Auburn, brought that to Vanderbilt.
I tell you what, Sam, you hit it on the head when you said they had that type of confidence. And the confidence, as you spoke earlier about the quarterback, Diego Pavia, it came from him, but it didn't just start with him or stop with him. When you have that type of confidence, it's because of your preparation. And you know, they out-coached Alabama. They out-schemed Alabama. They looked at their weaknesses and they exposed them. And not only did they expose them, they took it to them for 4 quarters. That's how you pull up an upset of that magnitude. Not only do you have to come into that game with confidence, but it comes from your preparation, your execution, because you were well prepared, because of the things you saw on film that you could take advantage of. That's what Vanderbilt did. But just like Sam said, this is a really, really good team, so don't get it twisted. This Vanderbilt team is going to beat a lot of teams this season.
And to your point, Des, they were more prepared, and they were also unafraid. So Vanderbilt was unafraid. Running back Cedric Alexander, who was a sophomore this year, last year as a freshman at Vanderbilt, he led all SEC freshmen in rushing touchdowns. And so they were like, that first touchdown that Vanderbilt took, he took it to the linebacker, ran over a linebacker. There was a play the very next play when Vandy was on offense, talking about being out-coached or out-maneuvered, where they motioned a fullback from the outside, and that fullback on offense for Vanderbilt just blew up one of Alabama's defensive ends. So that, to me, says that Vandy was more prepared and had better coaching on that Saturday than Alabama.
Yes, Sam, they were unafraid because respect is earned. It's not given in college football. And because now Kalen DeBoer is the head coach at Alabama and Nick Saban is gone, this team, every time they go on the field, they have to earn the respect. It's not going to be given any longer.
And speaking of Kalen DeBoer, he was pretty frustrated after that game, and he was also frustrated on Monday, and we got to hear from him, so let's take a listen.
Yeah, we are all extremely frustrated. I mean, but we aren't going to sit and lose our cool because, you know, I don't think that's the right way to go about it. You know, there's a time and place for everything, and again, we're still early in the season. You know, we left ourselves a little less wiggle room to achieve some of the goals we have. But those goals are still out there, and we need to just focus on what our whole mindset is always to improve every single day, and that's never going to change.
So, Des, where does Alabama go from here after losing to Vandy?
You know, I tell you what, this is moving forward. It's going to tell us a lot about Kalen DeBoer, about his coaching staff, and about the 2024 Alabama Crimson Tide also. We're going to see now. They play South Carolina. This is a winnable game, but by no stretch of the imagination should they take the Gamecocks lightly. And then after that, they have to go on the road and play Tennessee. So those 2 games are going to really determine, like, the trajectory of this season for the Alabama Crimson Tide. They're a good team. They have a lot of talent, but now they understand they cannot take any opponent lightly on any given Saturday. They have to always respect their opponent and bring their A game. So if I'm Kalen DeBoer and his staff, that's what I'm starting to preach to my team every day moving forward.
But all hope is not lost, Des, because there's now a 12-team playoff, and so one loss in the regular season is not going to eliminate you. You could even have 2 losses going into maybe an SEC championship game and still make the playoff. So all hope isn't lost. Alabama still has an opportunity. Texas is the only undefeated team in the SEC. Alabama has chances to continue to play, can potentially play for an SEC championship. Georgia and Texas, they play each other down the line, so Georgia may have a second loss. We saw Ole Miss lose. Tennessee has a loss as well. So where do they go from here? You regroup. You understand that no game or no quarter or no half is over until it's over. So you regroup, you take it to South Carolina, and this is the time where the leaders on that team, guys like Tyler Booker, Jalen Milroe, Malachi Moore, have to step up and actually be leaders.
Now, Pete, I'm going to bring you in on this. What other fallout was there from this game from the Alabama side?
Well, anytime there's a loss of this magnitude, Victoria, there is fallout. The indelible image from the loss from the Alabama side was senior captain Malachi Moore throwing what equated to a temper tantrum. He kicked the ball. He threw his mouthpiece. In a statement on Twitter on Monday, Moore apologized and said he was completely out of line for his actions. He will not be suspended by the Crimson Tide as he kind of came up and manned up for what he had done. Alabama will be without one key player for the rest of the season. That's defensive tackle Jaheim Otis. He's 6'5", 325 pounds. He had started 13 games in his career. His snaps decreased this year, coming off a couple injuries. He never quite got going. He told ESPN he planned to enter the NCAA transfer portal, and he's going to go seek playing time elsewhere. So that's a key piece of that defensive tackle rotation for Alabama.
Arkansas overcame a 14-3 third-quarter deficit to beat Tennessee 19-14. The Razorbacks notched their first win over an AP top 5 team since 2007. They had lost 18 straight against such teams entering Saturday. It was also their first home win over a top 5 opponent since beating the number 3 Volunteers back in 1999. Here's Coach Heupel on Monday.
This past week, offensively, you look at the football game, so many self-inflicted wounds. Pre-snap penalties, playing penalties, miscommunication. So at times you're not playing on tempo. For us, we got to do the ordinary things at a really high level. Last week, we didn't do that very well. Some of the things that we control, not taking anything away from Arkansas, but some of the things that we control, we did not handle very well.
Controlling those controllables is key. Now, Sam, what is the level of concern that you have for Tennessee after losing this game?
I am concerned for Tennessee, and it's moderate to high as if I had to answer that question in a relativity scale. And the reason why is that Nico Iamaleava has been challenged, right? Early in the season, they were setting records. He was beating Peyton Manning in the record books when it came to halftime stats and things you could do when they were scoring points. But the last 2 weeks versus Oklahoma and Arkansas, he hasn't thrown for over 200 yards. And these are good defenses. I'm not saying they're not good defenses. What I am saying is that he is going to continue to be challenged. Teams are starting to realize that this is a young quarterback who has a lot of hype that is going to be challenged. And so can he step up to the plate when they play Georgia, when they play Alabama, when they play Kentucky? That's going to be the questions I think need to be answered for Tennessee.
Yes, Sam, I agree with you 100%. I think that my level of concern is a moderate level right now. The problem with these teams is they come into the season, right, and we haven't seen them play. And like you said, you have Nico at the quarterback position, all of this talent, but then they start to run up scores on teams like Chattanooga, Kent State, even, NC State was not that great this year, but then they go on the road, and we were there, game day was there when they went to Norman. And I'm like, okay, now they're experiencing a little resistance. How are they going to respond? And Nico fumbled the ball. We turned the ball over multiple times in that game. And then last week, my biggest concern with them going into this Arkansas game was Bobby Petrino, the offensive coordinator for Arkansas. He's a guy who brought the running game to Arkansas, meaning now they run the ball at a pretty impressive clip, but they control the line of scrimmage, and more importantly, they win time of possession. They dictate the pace of the game to the opponent. So I knew that was going to be an issue for Tennessee, and that's why I think ultimately the reason why they lost that game. So moving forward, now they know where some of their weaknesses are. They know where some challenges are. They have to make some of the corrections, like Josh Heupel said. And we'll see if they're able to do that moving forward.
Welcome back. Now, rolling into the game, there was already adversity, a rowdy Cal game day crowd, and a Miami team that had to travel 3,000 miles to get to Cal. On top of playing their first game out of the state of Florida, the Canes rallied from a 25-point second-half deficit to beat California 39-38, thanks to Cam Ward, who led 4 straight touchdown drives to end the game. Now, Des, Miami has been fortunate to win their past 2 games versus Virginia Tech and Cal. What's your biggest takeaway from their performance?
Wow, Victoria, this team has been just escaping by the skin of their teeth the last 2 weeks. And obviously it starts with Cam Ward. I mean, he's such a phenomenal athlete, but his good is spectacular, but his bad is horrendous. And so you just have to take the good with the bad. Now, I've had conversations with various players and coaches, and they said that's what you get with Cam Ward, and you're just willing to endure the bad because the good is so great. So at this point, they're like 2 bad calls or 2 calls on the field away from having 2 losses. I think that if he's able to clean up some of those mistakes, and I think they're fixable, then I think there's an easier path for the Miami Hurricanes, and then they'll probably run into that team called the Clemson Tigers, because they're playing pretty good right now too, and that would probably happen in the ACC championship.
So far, they don't have to play them in the regular season, but potentially in the championship. Now, Sam, how do you think Miami stacks up with the rest of the top teams in the ACC?
Yeah, they're at or near the top, but not just by a standing perspective. I say near the top because there's some other teams. Des made the point. This could be a 2-loss team that we're looking at based off of a 25-point comeback and a call in the end zone off a catch versus Virginia Tech that could have been one way or another. But Pitt is undefeated. Pitt's playing really, really good football right now with Cade Bell as their offensive coordinator. Clemson, I think, is playing some of the best football in all of college football right now after their loss to Georgia early in the season. So there have been some positives that we're seeing from Miami, but there's still some question marks. SMU's playing great ball in the ACC. We talked about Cal. Though they lost, Cal's playing some good football. So I say at or near the top, but I still think there's still a lot to be had, a lot left to prove for Miami. There's one thing to say, man, we came back from this big loss and, we were trailing 25, and that's one thing, and that's positive, but how do you respond? Do you keep on playing it close, or do you finally turn it on and not be down by 25 in the third quarter?
Now, speaking of the top and being the best, the Heisman race continues to have twists and turns with a new front runner emerging. Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty, who in the first half of this past game against Utah State ran for 186 yards and 3 touchdowns. And the Broncos have never had a Heisman Trophy winner in its history. And it is time now for our Capital One rewarding performance. Ashton Jeanty is the 3rd FBS player since 1990 with 1,000 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns through his team's first 5 games. He's on pace to break several of Barry Sanders' records, including rush yards and rush touchdowns. Now, Des, no big deal here, but you're a Heisman Trophy winner. So what does Jeanty need to do if he is going to win the trophy this year?
Yeah, guys, I think for Jeanty to win the trophy, first of all, he's going to have to be consistent. I mean, now his name is on the map. He's a guy who 5 games into the season, no one was really talking about Ashton Jeanty, right? But because of his performance, we're starting to give him national attention, national recognition. So now a lot of voters are going to start to watch, okay, this kid from Boise State, number 2, let's check him out week in and week out and see if he continues to put up these numbers. I don't think they're going to have any big marquee national games, but if they're in the dogfight, and he's the difference maker in the game, despite who the opponent is, that's going to elevate his status as a Heisman Trophy candidate too. So continue doing what he's doing, which I think he can, because as a matter of fact, he was phenomenal a year ago too. And then if he has any big games, any dogfights, make sure he's the difference in Boise State coming out victorious.
And if I'm not mistaken, Des, you, as a Heisman Trophy winner, also get a chance to vote. And so you're one of the people who are watching and seeing. And so for me, I'm wondering, okay, can a running back from a smaller school like Boise State surpass the likes of a Travis Hunter, surpass the likes of someone like Jalen Milroe? The last time that Jeanty was on the field last week, the first time he touched the ball was a 63-yard touchdown. Later on in the game, 75-yard touchdown. So he's making big plays. But can you do those big plays on big stages? Yes, Boise State plays UNLV. Yes, Boise State plays Oregon State. Will those be big enough stages not to have Ashton Jeanty make and become a Heisman Trophy finalist, but to win it all? That's what I'm really excited to see how this thing plays out.